What's up YouTube, and welcome to another draw along with me, where today we're going to create this awesome nebula iris design. So it's meant to look like an eye, but is also a galaxy at the same time. Now, as always, there's links to everything you're going to need in the description down below, and that is pretty much the canvas size, the palette, as well as a little guide that you're going to need just to make sure we're all drawing in the right area. As always, if you enjoyed this tutorial, please drop a like down below and hit the subscribe button for weekly Procreate tutorials. But if you want even more tutorials from me, you can come and join me over on Patreon. There's a link in the description down below where you can get access to a catalogue of over 70 tutorials when you join, with 3 more added every single month. So be sure to check that out in the description down below. And with all that said, let's get started. So once you've created your canvas, and you're going to need to go up to your actions there and go to the option of add and then hit insert a photo, and you'll be able to insert the guide as I have here. Now you can't see it at the minute, but at the moment we've got the guide at the top, we've got an empty layer, and we've got the background color. So try to match up to that. And so the first thing we'll do is we will tap on our background color, and we'll go ahead and double tap at the bottom of the disk to select black and hit done. And then you'll see the guide come into play. Now all this is obviously 2 circles, that's the center of the eye/galaxy, and then that's kind of a line we want to somewhat move up to. We don't want it as a circle, we want it to have that little bit of a sort of oval look to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and just lower that guide down to about sort of 25%, so I can barely see it, and you can obviously do it as much as you wish on your own. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our layers, making sure we're on an empty layer. And our color is set to this color here. It's the 3rd color on that top row, this nice blue color. And then we're going to go to our brush library, and under luminance, we're going to grab the nebula brush. Now the opacity wants to be set to 53% or thereabout. And we're going to fluctuate the sizes, but I'm going to start off around about sort of 6%. Now I want you to be super, super light. In fact, I'm going to pop on the side of the screen now what we're going to try and actually aim for at this step. So you'll notice it's really, really light. And we're going to start off with a little bit of blue that runs round in this area here. And then I'm just going to slowly make my way outwards. So just going round in a circle, getting progressively bigger, and just letting that blue just tread outwards every single time. And you may just about be able to see that it's slowly picking up a few different areas of color. And I'm just going to continue. Now, in fact, we could probably make the brush size about 9% and speed that up a little bit. Just increasing that color all the way around. And as we get closer towards the edges, we're just going to start to consider then introducing another tone. But for now, we'll just get that sort of blue area done in the middle. And then we'll switch our color to the sort of bluer, darker, purpley tone at the top here. So it's the 4th color on that top row. And as it just transitions out towards the right and left-hand side, we're just going to go ahead and just introduce this color and let the two just nicely blend into one another. Likewise at the bottom as well. And again, you want to keep this super light. So super, super light, letting that just move really close to the edge over here. And go all the way up towards the edge of our eye. We do want to sort of somewhat fill that shape quite a bit. Feel free to reduce the brush size maybe down to 6% if you feel like you can get a little bit closer to those gaps and maybe fill in these little corners over here. And then lightly just blend on top of the blue till you end up with a really lovely transition between the 2 areas. And again, I'm going to switch back to my blue now. And I'm just going to make sure that that center point is as it looks on the screen that you can see. So just go around that center just a little bit. I don't want it to be too bright because we've got some yellow that's going to go in there as well. So I'm somewhat going around a little bit wider than that circle because the yellow is going to take up the center area. We can always adjust it later on because of how I've done the layers in this particular tutorial. So I'm just going to go ahead and maybe just go back over that once more. Just try and introduce a bit more of the blue tone. Make it a little bit bright. And we want those random little splodges of color. That's going to help us a lot later on. So at this point, we're going to then go ahead and go to our layers, and we're going to create a new layer. We're going to go ahead and change the blend mode from normal to add. And we're slowly going to go ahead and progressively make our brush smaller, and also go ahead and just get more and more fine with every bit of detail that we can add in. So I'm down to around about sort of 4% now. Now for a moment that will do, we're just going to go ahead and just brush in a little random areas of blue, really, really light again. We're just letting it be really light, just random little splodges of blue here and there. And you can see there's a couple lines in there, there's a couple of dashes, that's fine. That looks lovely. It'll just give us a nice little bit of character to build on top of later on. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to grab our color and we're going to switch it to the top left color in the palette, this nice yellow tone. I'm going to reduce the brush size to about 3%. I want to be a bit more precise. And in this center area here, we're going to start to sort of outline the eye a little bit more. So I'm just going to go ahead and run some yellow in just dashes and splodges and little areas of color just all the way around the center point of the eye. I keep referring to this as an eye because I want it to be a nebula iris design. So that's exactly what we're doing. Otherwise, it's just like a galaxy in the style of an eye. So I'm just sort of making my way around that center point, and then I'm slowly going to start to introduce like little curves and fall off. So where I've got like little blocks of color, I'm just going to drag out a little tail here and there. So just drag out a few little lines of color that can just run off like that, and another one maybe here too, and just let the lines run in. You can block in a gap if you want. You can still have those lines run off. Let them just nicely start to make their way away from the center, just drifting back in towards the blue tones. Just make sure your consistency is there in terms of length. And also just in behind that main sort of circle area, we are going to go ahead and start to just dash in again a few areas of color, just a little bit further back, a little bit of yellow here and there. My brush pressure on the actual screen itself right now, super, super light. And try to replicate that again for yourselves. Just keep it really, really light, couple of dashes here and there, making its way further backwards. And with this particular design, we're going to end up going round and round and round with more and more detail as we go to each layer. So at this point, we're sort of adding in some basic structure of the layer of this particular part of the design. Now we are going to go ahead and go to our colors, and we're going to grab the blue color again. I'm going to make the brush size around about sort of 2%. That's nice and fine. And for a moment, we're going to go ahead and continue to run lines out from the center. So I'm just going to run lines outwards. Now we want them to be nice and light, nice and gentle. You want to vary up your pressure a little bit, and we want them to run in towards the center like so. So they're all pointing inwards, and you're going to have to keep an eye on where you started so you don't just continue to go round and round. But I'm just running lots of lines in towards the center. Now, when I was looking at some reference images for this, I referred to them in my live stream as strands. You know, these little strands that run in the eye, because there's so much structure in your eye that you cannot obviously see unless you're really under a macro lens. So all of these beautiful strands are just running in towards the center. And we're just making sure that each one just points inwards, and I'll undo a few. I'm varying up my weights, varying up the gaps, and also the density. If I feel like a certain area could do with another line, that's fine. Some of them are not running all the way to the edge. And I'm also abiding by my guide as well. I'm trying to just give that little oval shape. So I'm not sort of going all the way around into this area down here. I'm following that line there of the guide. So we've got a little bit more of an eye shape to it rather than just a circle. So I'm just going to continue to run some more lines in towards the center. And at these sort of stages, everything's going to be really kind of almost blurry. We're going to get into the fine details later, but for now, they're going to look a little bit like this, where we've got some really kind of blurry details. And then we're going to run round again, but we're going to take a look at now some of the lines we've made, and we're just going to kind of create like little pointed arrows almost, or slightly more rounded, it's totally up to you, between some of your bands. So these are just going to be some of the structures in the eye. So you can sort of run them in, and if you don't see any sort of touching or too close to each other, you can just make it up. So like here, for example, I don't have a line here to join this too. I can just run one off of it, that's fine, and maybe run another line off. And they don't always have to be kind of like these N shapes. You can make them kind of run across a couple of lines, almost like an M rather than an N. You can just add in a little bit color. Make sure it's nice and light though. Don't overdo it at this stage. We just want to go ahead and just introduce some basic structure of the eyes, and then go over some of your lines if you feel like you maybe want to brighten them up. We're just going to run this across, and there I was really, really loose with it and just let it run across a few of the lines and almost like scribbling up and down. The only thing I'm kind of trying to make sure is the gaps are always the same sort of distance from that center point. So here we're just going to continue to make our way all the way around. And this is quite a therapeutic design for this, because we just keep doing the same thing on each layer and each stage is, the same for each part. So we just got to just go all the way around and just apply it throughout the whole of the eye. Yes, you could use a drawing assist and save yourself some time. If you know how to apply those, you can do that. But it's going to give you some repeating elements, and I'm not a fan too much of seeing repetition. With something like this, we want it to be completely unique. And also bear in mind, every eye that we all draw, just like in real life, is going to be a little bit different to each other. So don't stress too much if yours looks a little bit off compared to mine. And I say off, I mean just different. Now we're also going to go ahead and, while we're on this layer, switch our color now to that purpley tone, so the fourth color on that top row again. I'm going to make my brush size around about the 3% mark, and just towards the outside edges over here, just try and very lightly, that was probably a little bit too much, believe it or not, just dash in random areas of purple. So just let the sort of, where we've got the blue dashes we added in earlier, I'm now just adding some purple dashes just towards the outside edges, just to add a little bit more character to those outside parts of the eye. So just adding in some extra little details, and I'm trying to vary them up with the weights, and maybe some of them are lines rather than sort of horizontal lines, or just little buffs and scuffs in the eye, extra character. You start to sort of see that outer structure come into play as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to my yellow again. Now I've done my outer lines, go back to the yellow with a around about sort of 3 to 2%. We don't want it to be too big at this point. We also don't want it to be too small. So I'm going to go to a 2% because there are different sizes in between. And I'm just going to go ahead and probably even a smaller 2% than that. Just run over that center point now and start to bulk in some more color. And especially on these like outer parts as well, get a little bit brave with some of those. And just like we've done here, these are kind of V shapes and these ones are quite smooth arcs. When you get to sort of this space here, you want to do something in between. So we've got a bit of an arc here and a bit of a point. So try and just introduce like a rounded point just there, but a rounded one. That way that'll aid us later on in the design. And we can nicely now just build on top of these yellows. We're going to basically make the center a little bit brighter. All these colours now are starting to drift into one another, but they still have their separated areas. So you've got this beautiful yellow, and I'm pressing a little bit firmer as it gets right close to that centre point, and then it kind of drifts off in behind and runs into some of the more greeny tones as well. And then I'm just going to make sure I add in those sort of curves of colour just in behind there, like a curve there. We don't want it to be repetitive, so I'm going to try and vary up sort of the pressures, vary up some of the sizes, and also some of the trails off. Some of them can be a little bit longer, like that one. Some of them can be a little bit shorter. And like I said, at this point, everything's going to look a little bit sort of fuzzy, so just bear with it. We're also then going to go to our colours and grab this colour here, the second colour on that top row. And this is a little bit more of a warmer, redder tone. So we're just going to, in behind some of these like yellowy areas, we can introduce a little bit of red that trails off of the back of them. And also just in here, just like the odd sort of speck of red would look lovely. It's just a bit of a variety of colour. And these are all colours that we can build on top of later on in the design. So I'm just introducing a little bit sort of very randomly placed, like a little bit in behind some of the yellow, a little bit up close to some of those curved shapes that we created a second ago. You can also create the odd little sort of line that just runs off, a little bit of colour that just runs off from that centre point. You can also get it really close. Like here, I've left this one a little bit, arguably a little bit too light. So I can get in there now and just dash in a little bit of that red, and you get a few of those peachy, reddy tones, even some pink tones in there as well. Now your eye should start to look a little bit something like this. And we're then going to move on again to another set of finer details. So we're going to build on top of what we've done again. So we're going to create another new layer, change blend mode from normal, change it to add. We'll go to our color and we'll grab the blue again. And we're going to go ahead and make the brush size a very small 2%, if not 1, but we want to slowly get smaller and smaller with our detail. So for a moment, just try the 2%, see what it looks like. For me, that's looking a little bit too big, and obviously it's the blue, so I need to be working down here. So I'm actually going to make it a large 1%. We want to keep hold of the possibility of making a small 1% later on. Now, with the blue selected, we're going to start to refine some of these shapes and boost some of the color. So I'm going to see there, I just used the sort of pointed V shape. I might not do both sides. I may just do one side just a little bit. I'm just going to boost the color and maybe create a bit of a trail off from there. So I'll go down some of these lines and just create like a bit of a brighter spot. You can also as well, if you see a line or you want to introduce a line, you can just run over the top of that and maybe make that a little bit brighter. And we're going to focus our attention in this area here. We don't want to do absolutely everything. We want to have a variety of colors and tones in here. So I'm just running over the top of some of my line work. I can see a beautiful line here that kind of zigzags off to the side there. I've got a very sharp point in there, and I'm maybe just going to brighten up the point of it and then let the lines from there run outwards. So kind of focus on one thing at a time. So I'm going to focus on these sort of arc shapes that we created. So I'm going to just bring that in and maybe just boost that outwards. And eventually what's going to happen is we are going to slowly end up getting to the point where we then build on top of it with the purple in this area. We'll build on top of the same lines with the yellow in towards that center point. And we're going to slowly get finer and finer with the details. But it's a bit of a process, I must admit. So bear with me and the tutorial. I'm sure you're going to love the end result. But it's definitely one that, takes a little bit of repetition, but it's fun. And I'm not going to skip ahead. I never do in my tutorials. So you can either listen to me waffle or you can put me on mute. Totally up to you. I'm just going to continue to make my way around. Occasionally I'll say something that's actually useful rather than just sort of fill in the dead air. But in here, I'm just going to introduce a couple more lines in there, a couple of brighter ones. And that's the goal. We want these to be a little bit brighter than the last layer. Oh, lovely. I love that. That one's got a little bit of different shape to it, much like that one. That one's got a bit of a fork shape to it. I'm going to run in a line out from there and let that get into here, off there. I'm going to introduce another line. We want a nice consistent amount of color that runs around on this particular sort of tier of it. It's almost like we're in like bands. We've got the yellow band in the center that runs out into the blue. And then from the blue, we're going to run into the purple. So we want to have a good variety of color in those areas and good consistency though. That's quite an important part. It's just to make sure it's nice and consistent. Covering over all these lines. We're going to introduce a lot of lines later on as well, just to continue on the fine detail look. You also want to sort of keep an eye on where you started. So I know I started here, so just going to make my way towards that now before we wrap up the lines in blue. Introduce some brighter areas, and maybe that one just runs right out to the edge. Now, taking a look at it, very happy with that at this particular stage. Let's move on to the yellow in the center. So we're going to switch our color out and we're going to grab the yellow in the top left of the palette. And we're now going to start to work on top of these small areas of color that we introduced earlier. So where I've got these sort of curved bands a little bit further out, I'm going to build on top of them. And I am going to make the brush eyes even smaller, another sort of smaller 1%. I'm saving the very smallest size of 1% for later on. And then I'm just on top of the sort of edges that face the front. So here I've got an arc, for example, the face of it is here. It's not here, obviously, because that would be in behind. This is the front. So here I've got to just introduce a little bit of a brighter tone, and you can just let that run off. You can then let it also peel downwards as well. And we're just introducing little dashes and scuffs and buffs. That's all I want you to do, is just lots of scuffs and buffs around the outside here. So I'm just going to go over the top, and you can let them just get real close towards the front as well. And then let them run off into here. Again, eventually we're going to end up linking the yellow into the blue as well. But for now, we're just going to go over the top of these. Now, while I'm just sort of working on the yellow, I'm also going to cover this sort of front point. So the very front edge over here of our eye, we're going to go ahead and get in here. And on the top edge, we're going to introduce some lovely extra tones in here. So just letting these lines just run off on the sides and bounce around. Lovely stuff. And that front edge is going to be the brightest. So we're going to sort of, they're almost like clouds. You're kind of creating the top edge of a cloud almost. So I'm going to let that run in behind there. Go over the top of this one as well. And if you have a little gap, maybe just put like a dash in there, or just a singular little scuff on its own. Just introducing that, and you can see the difference between the two sides. Look how much more crisp this looks. And we've still got the sort of very small 1% to do. So as I make my way around now, I'm going to sort of focus on the center, and then I'll make my way onto those outer areas as well that we're working on, those nice little curved areas. And I'm trying to just let these lines just sort of run in behind each other and kind of stack on top of each other. That's fine. It'll just add so much more detail to the eye. Let's then go ahead and go over the top of this as well. Just introducing a bit of finer detail on this edge. And in between those gaps as well, feel free just to really bulk out some of the color in there. Maybe I'll add a little bit in there too, another bit into there. We can build this out, and again, you'll be able to see on the left hand side anyway what it is we're doing at this particular stage. We're just going to build up on here, build up on there, and then where you've got some bigger gaps, maybe just add in the odd little sort of curve of yellow. Put in another one in behind, so that those front runners. We've got the front runners that run around the main part of the iris, the hole in the middle, or the black hole of the galaxy, whichever one you want to refer to this as. And then in behind, we've got all these extra little tail offs. Continue to run these all the way around. I'm trying to be a little bit sort of preserved with my pressure. I'm trying not to, at this stage, just go a little bit too crazy. I want to just have more possibilities later on by having more pressure that I can build up on top of. I'm just going to go ahead and just add some more into there. This is looking very nice so far. And as always, zoom out, take a look at what it is we're achieving at this particular stage. We are really building up those lovely, lovely details in the front of the eye. And like I said, everyone's eye is going to look a bit different in terms of the design. So feel free just to redo this afterwards, have some fun with maybe changing up some colors, maybe introduce some green rather than the blue color there, or change it up completely however you wish. But as long as you follow the same sort of rules and principles, you'll end up with a really cool design, and everybody's is going to look different, which is kind of cool. I quite like that. It's going to be really interesting to see your designs on Instagram. So please make sure to tag me in your finished creations when you're done. Now I've got a big area over here. I'm just going to introduce a bit of extra brightness on there and a couple of dashes in behind, like the odd sort of part of the galaxy. This is what I'm trying to remember at the same time. It is meant to be a galaxy at the same time. So like a little dash here and there. It's going to look really nice. It's going to be like an odd little sort of star or something, which we are going to move on to in a moment. But we should end up with a little something like this. So it's now really starting to come to life in that center point. It's all coming a lot more in terms of the amount of color and the transition and the detail. The detail is coming, I promise. I'm just going to introduce a few more areas there just for a moment, just a couple of extra ones. Now, before we move on, I want to go ahead and introduce some of the stars. So we're going to go to our layers and we're going to create a new layer. And where we had this initial background wash, I'm going to grab the new layer and put it in front of there. And we can rename this if you want. We can call this stars, just so we know. And on this layer, we're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this middle color in the first column. We're going to go to our brush library and we're going to go ahead and grab the light pen. And with a brush size around about sort of 21% to start with, we are going to create a huge galaxy of stars. Now this is going to look really, really impressive if you really put the time in here to put a lot of tiny little dashes in here. And then with the light pen, you can press a little bit firmer and get some bigger stars. And we're just going to continue to go all the way around. So lots of small stars, and vary up your size and pressure. And you'll be able to fill out this beautiful big sky. We've got lots of space. And I'm going to show you in a second a way sort of how we can duplicate the amount of detail in here. Essentially, we are going to do exactly that. We're going to duplicate the layer, and we're going to add in even more stars by just duplicating it, shrinking it down, and then just covering the stars with a lot more of the finer details. I'm going to increase my brush size up a little bit. I'm going to go up to 32% now, just so it's pressure sensitive, so I can tap really lightly and get a tiny little star, or I can press quite firm and get a nice big glowy star. And we want to really fill out the whole of this. And this is kind of a part of the design where, especially when I did it in my live stream, it kind of takes it from the point of, are we trying to replicate an eye, or is this something different? Is this more than just an eye? Is it, what type of design is this? And I think it looks awesome. I think this really sets it apart now when you add the stars in it. it's like a 2-in-1 design. So you're getting kind of two things for this. And we're just tapping away, filling in the sky. And you can put lovely little clusters together. I'm being super fine in some areas just to add in some nice constellations, and then pressing a little bit firmer here and there to add in some stars. And with this, you kind of want to tap, you don't want to drag, otherwise you'll create a little bit of a sort of warped star. Feel free to, you know, hold your pen down and just let it tail off and maybe create like a little bit of a shooting star in there. It's totally up to you. I may add one towards the end. I want to see what my final design looks like first. So that's just a consideration for you. If you want to do that at this stage, you are more than welcome to. But already this is just coming together. It looks so, so cool. Really beautiful. I'm going to move it across and keep just adding in a few more here and there where I think is necessary. Just tapping away, really trying to give it a lot of density. And as I mentioned, the one way you can really make this a lot more dense, go to the layer, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Grab your cursor. The first thing you can do is just flip it horizontally and then maybe rotate it just a little bit. That way you won't get that sort of mirrored look to it. And you can rotate it, you can maybe make it a little bit smaller, as long as you don't run into that space in the center. And you should end up then really packing out the galaxy there. And then at this point, just grab your eraser if you need to, tap on it and maybe use something like calligraphy and the monoline brush with a maximum size, and get rid of any that run a little bit astray of our guide. So I'm kind of looking top left and bottom right here, just to make sure nothing sort of runs out of the design. Now, that already to me is the perfect amount. So I'm going to leave my 2 star layers there, and I'm going to go ahead and tap on the top layer that we were working on, and I'm going to create another new layer. I'm going to tap on the blend mode and change it from normal to add. So we added in those sort of mid details. We're now going to get into the point of adding some fine details. So we're going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to grab first of all the yellow. I'm going to work in that center point. So I'm going to tap on the yellow. I'm going to change my brush back to the nebula brush in luminance. And we're going to make this a very, very small 1%. We're going to get into a lot of detail here. So this is where your sort of patience is going to come into it. And we're going to go ahead and just run this nice and bright, nice and fine over the top edge of all of those lovely big bright areas that we created earlier. And I'm creating little dashes and scuffs and buffs here and there. So just creating lots of little tiny details. Now, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do one whole side view and then zoom out, so you can really see the difference. Like at this point with a 1%, we are getting into some really granular detail. But with this particular type of design, I actually think it's quite fun and quite therapeutic. So I would imagine you'll also enjoy it as well. But each one of these little areas towards the outside now, I'm also going over the top of them. And you can build up a lot more highlight. If you didn't before, that's fine. Now I'm going over the top of some of these here now, letting them just then trail off. We're creating lots of trails because eventually we're just going to just let that run out exactly like this. And that is what we're going to do on this layer. So these are the types of things we're going to try and achieve all the way around. So let's focus first of all on that center point and just continue to go all the way around this edge here first of all. So I'm going round over the top of some of the brighter areas and trying to create lots of bumps and detail and like areas and avenues of where this galaxy runs, and obviously trying to reflect sort of the concept of an eye as well. Lots of details there, and I'm going to go ahead and continue to go round. And they don't always have to be lots of fine little areas. You can have larger areas, larger lines that run around. They'll also look very, very cool. So I'm just going to create some larger lines in here, so they don't all have to look like that. You can vary it up, create smaller areas and create larger areas. In fact, it may even be better in actual fact just to create some larger areas first and then maybe go in with the smaller ones, so you don't overdo the detail. You don't want to sign up to doing absolutely tons of it. So in behind there, I'm going to run in and get some more little specks that break off of that front line. They just break off in behind, tapping away. They're almost like flames, you know, just breaking off in behind that front wall for our black hole. And I'm almost through to halfway, so we'll zoom out in a second and you can take a look at sort of the whole thing and how it all came about. So we're just going to continue out. I mean, you can see on the left hand side anyway, but I really want to show you that contrast and difference between the two and how just getting to this point, trust in the process, which of course there is merch for in the description down below. If you want to go ahead and grab yourself a Trust the Process hoodie of my own, you'd be supporting the channel if you do. But it's very much true regardless. Got to trust that process from start to finish. So I'm just carrying on, and as I sort of said, as one of my watchers on my stream has said before, you've got to get through the ugly stage. And when you zoom out and you take a look at how much beautiful detail is on this side compared to this side, we are just continuing to make our way through that stage. We're really getting through it, and we're creating this crispy, gorgeous detail. So I'm just going to go around and continue all the way through. So again, I'm not going to speed up or go ahead in any way. Unfortunately, you'll have to follow with me a little bit, and then we've got to go round again afterwards in that sort of outer tier as well. So I'm just going to make my way around here. I'm creating then the old sort of little trail I can maybe work off of later. Big line there. That's lovely. Big line there. Some beautiful dashes in there, and we want them all to kind of naturally just blend off and fade off as well. So I'm pressing quite firm in certain areas, but I just want to make sure I do have that little area of trail off at the end of a line. I don't want all of them to be super crispy and just crispy from start to finish. I want the line to blend outwards as it just runs away. Lovely big line here. That looks lovely. Another one here. That runs up into a really lovely big bright spot. And you can leave a couple of gaps if you want. Totally up to you. I think the crisper though, the better. So getting in there with a few more extra areas. And again, I need to make sure I'm going around, and just the same with yourselves, going around, and as you go around, just adding in lots of little scuffs and buffs, little dashes, little taps and scrapes. They're just like it's just another level of detail that you don't need to really think about too much. Just let them just dash around, be really loose with it. And I'm very nearly back round at the starting point, so that's great. We can move on to those outer edges and potentially refine some areas as well if needs be. It's running over the top of some of these areas. My hand's got cramped now, so let me know in the comments at what minute your hand got cramped. I think I pressed a little bit too firm when it comes to these very small, fine details, and it crushes my hand. It really does. And I'm going to go round on here too. Let that just run down and into there. Dashes and scrapes, dashes and scrapes. I need to make sure I add in behind, and make sure that at the start here where I started that I also reflect that as well. So zooming out, that center point now is super crispy. Super crispy. We've got lots of beautiful detail in there. And now we need to go ahead and make our way around these outer edges, and we really need to start to involve some of those lots of streaks that are going to run off. So I'm going to first of all start off with the sort of bumps and the sort of curved arcs that we created earlier. And as I kind of run my pen towards the edges, I'm just letting that trail just run off. So I've created like a bundle of color there, and I'll do the same here as well. And then I'm just going to let that line just run away, and I'll create another one here as well. It just runs away, and then maybe I'll change up the shape a little bit here. We do want to have a graduation between the two, so this bump here of color, I am going to introduce some color onto the top edge of that in a similar fashion to the ones above, but then just let that color just drift away and let those lines and the threads of the eye just run down, like a little bit something like this. And we're going to have to do that all the way around and from the center point as well. So some of these areas here, I'm just going to create a really thin line off of there, like here as well. I'm going to just let those lines just run away, all these beautiful threads, and they're going to help the detail level immensely towards the end. So at one point we will just go around and simply just add threads if needs be, but for now we're just going to build on top of those lovely brighter spots, and you can go a little bit nuts like there and really boost that level of detail. But we're creating these lovely trails that are going to run off the back edge of them. So these lovely trails are just going to run all the way outwards, down towards those blue tones, and that's kind of where you want it to kind of stop. You don't need to run off from there. And again, you can, just like the blue, you can follow a line and then let it split, go off onto another area if you want to. So I'm just going to create another one here. Again, you want these to be a little bit more rounded. They don't have to be perfectly rounded, of course, but you want to just have that little extra rounding to them, because then they run into those ones here and they tend to be a little bit pointy. So those points basically continue to go all the way up towards the center, and then they flatten out a little bit. So let's get through this, shall we? Let's just carry on and build on top of all that beautiful work we've done already, and introduce these beautiful lines that just run outwards. And taking a look at that, that's kind of the effect that we want to try and get to. And we're going to build on top of that even more later on with some additional colors. But for now, we're just going to continue on and create these beautiful trails off. So you can, if you want to, just start to run in some lines, just like some long lines that break off and split off into different directions as well. They don't all have to be just individual threads. They can break off just the same way the blue ones did. Lovely stuff. Making sure we go around on these little bumps of color as well. We're kind of doing a 2-for-1 at this point. We're introducing these beautiful areas of bright color and letting them get really, really light in behind themselves. And again, little scuffs and buffs, they'll look fantastic. And again, just try and create those beautiful trails outwards. Zoom out if you need to, just to make sure your lines run into the sort of similar direction than the blue ones we created as well. We want them to have a lot of consistency to the rest of it. You don't want them running off at different angles, because that'd be quite a pain to undo. There, I'm just going to create some more. And they don't all have to be super straight either. You can have some in there that are going to just run off, and then they can just veer off in a different direction altogether if you want, like a little bit like this. They don't have to be somewhat straight running. They can just run off on their own. Lovely stuff, lovely stuff. I really hope you're enjoying this as well. I'm really enjoying this nebula style. And if you haven't already seen, I've done a mountains design on YouTube with another galaxy using the nebula brush. So if you like this one, that might be one for you to crack on with straight after this. It's free and on YouTube, so you can have some fun with that one. I like to really really deep dive into a design and a style once I find one, and just really have some fun with it and have a couple of attempts at it with a couple of different subjects. So this is like a different subject based on like an eye, and that one's based off of a bit more of a landscape and a Milky Way in the sky in behind the mountains. So yeah, have some fun with that one if you get involved. And then like here, I'm just going to create like the odd tiny little arc, just a little smaller one that's just a little bit further out. So I've got like little areas here which are a little bit blank, and I can create like little tiny arcs and just run some color off of them as well. And this level of detail is going to look immense when we get towards the end. So we're about a quarter or a third of the way around on this particular part. So we will just have to keep going, keep motoring along. But you may already know, if you're a fan of the channel and you have been around for a little while, I do love myself a space theme. I've not done any for quite a while, so diving into this one was quite fun. Really, really fun. And I did this on my live streams, which I do every Wednesday. If you want to come and hang out on a Wednesday with me, you can keep an eye on the channel, turn on your notifications. You'll be notified of when I go live, and you can just come and hang out with me while I draw. And this was one we did on the live stream, and it's great. You get to have a little bit of an impact in the tutorial itself, and say, I always tend to kind of run a few things past my viewers and say, well, do you prefer this or this kind of thing? And it's cool because you guys get to have a bit of a say in, should we do this or should we not do this, and what colors maybe to introduce. And it's really good fun. You can come and hang out with me over there. So like I said, this is going to be the part that's going to take up a lot of time really at the moment, just these yellow trails, and it's a lot of it. And again, this is why I said if you want to, you can introduce a radial drawing guide, so you only have to do maybe an eighth of the canvas at the same time, but you're going to get a lot of repetition on either side. So my preference would be that you don't do it, but I can totally understand if you do. Save yourself some time and let that do all the work for you. That's a beautiful thing about Procreate. There's so many wonderful tools that they can just aid you and save yourself some time. I've got a big gap here, and I'm just going to introduce a few dashes and a scrape and a buff here and there. I don't want to stack them too heavily as well. Like, I don't want them to be like in rows almost. And that eye is really coming to life from that center point. Let's continue off from here and just create all these lovely trails. And the blues are going to take over from this shortly. So all of these little threads that we're making now are going to be part of a bigger piece almost. So they're pretty vital. We don't have to let them run off of any particular area either. We can just literally run in some lines here. Like here, I'm just going to run in a line or two. They don't have to run from like an edge of a line that's already there. Taking a look at that, I'm always zooming out because I always want to make sure that I'm consistent. I don't want to sort of add in details and stuff. If I'm starting to overdo it, I know I need to reel it back in, and I can go backwards a little bit and undo some of the details, because you don't want to sign yourself up then to another level of detail on top of what we're already doing in this particular design anyway. And also make sure that your weights are consistent, your lines are, didn't start to veer off accidentally as we make your way round. Lovely stuff, lovely stuff. I think I'm starting to maybe add a few more. Like over here, I didn't quite add in quite as many. I'll just add another one up there, for example, and let that just veer off. And they don't always have to be the same level of consistency, but just to make sure that there is a level of consistency to an extent. They don't all have to be the same gap all the way around, which is of course why we're trying to avoid using the drawing guide. Lovely stuff, lovely stuff. So we're very nearly there. We're just making our way around on this particular point. We've got a few more details, of course, to add in, but this is just that one stage. It's just going to take up a bit of time. And when I was doing it live, it was something I didn't realize I signed myself up to, but in the end, it's most definitely worth it. So running these lines out from that center point, and you can have a couple again that have a couple of lines off of them. They don't all have to be super straight and singular lines. So I may go back around just super quickly in a second and just make sure that there are a couple of threads that are on dual lines almost, so that there's two on one line, or maybe even three, that they break off. Keeping it nice and random that way then. And that's the hard thing sometimes with something like this, where you've got like a bit of an element like this. You've got to create randomness. Randomness will equals sort of more realism, because nature and everything in our world is not so perfect and repetitive. So we have to try and replicate it. So zooming in, I'm just going to go round quickly and just introduce some break-offs here and there that are just like different threads. Super random. I'm just trying to grab a line that I can see and then just run another line off of it, and they're just veering outwards. Beautiful. That's so cool. Almost like little veins, but they're the threads of the eye. That's cool. This area here is super, super straight with those lines, so I'm just going to break them up a little bit. And if I get back to my start point, we've now got all of this super beautiful detail in the center. Now, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the blue, and you guessed it, we're going to kind of replicate the same work we've just been doing, but on the blue areas, and run them into some purple. So for example, where we've got these areas here of the blue, I'm going to get on top of them and just run a line down here, just exactly the same. And we're going to kind of then do two things at the same time. We're going to take a look at where we created those sort of very pointy arcs, and you can run down both sides if you wish, and then let that kind of like break out on its own. We're going to run the purple over the top, and we're also going to take a look, and then when you've got some of the yellow that's coming down, continue that on. So I'm going to go ahead and, like, for example, just continue on some of these yellow lines here, and again they can break out a little bit as they make their way down, and we're just going to carry on. And look at that there, it just looks so crispy. And again, we're getting through that ugly stage again and just building on top of here, and then breaking these lines out, creating lots of awesome detail. But we had to build up the layers in behind in order to get to this stage. So sometimes you do have to really get your foundations right of your design before you can really build on top of it, you know. And that looks beautiful. It looks so mystical, like a mystical galaxy. And then just going to continue on, like following some of those yellow lines on top of some of the blue areas, and, you know, in the gaps find a yellow stroke here and there that you made and let that run out. And we're going to go on these again in a second, but with the purple. And so we can keep them going. We keep the lives of them going a little bit further all the way down towards the bottom. And then here I'm going to run a line with blue all the way into there. And then I don't have to do both sides, you know, I can let that one get a little bit thinner there, for example, and then maybe follow in a different area over here. You don't have to do every single bit all the way around. I'm going to go in here, create some lovely split offs, and these details on top, they just wow me. Like, I think at this stage as well, hopefully you're thinking the same thing, you know, at this stage here, especially when you zoom out, these are the details now that just look fantastic on top of the work we've already done. So well done to you if you're all the way through it at this point, and you get the reward now of this particular part of the design where we're just getting those fantastic details. Continuing our lovely little area of blue outwards, and the blue always looks super spacey anyway, so this will really help our design. I'm going to just create that little fork there, and maybe even another one that runs off over here. And I've got a bit of a gap there, so I'm going to follow down with a yellow and maybe break that off as well. And they don't always have to go all the way to the edge, but look at the difference between that side and this side. Super blurry, not very crisp at all, but this level of, like, now we're getting into this level of detail now is just wow. I love it. Awesome stuff. That little backdrop of all those colors that we introduced, the purples, the yellows, even some of the reds now, are just helping to really bring these outer areas now to life, because it's got something to live on top of, and because it's set to add as well, it needs a little bit of color underneath it so you can build on top of it. Taking a look, I'm going to create like other little threads here and there. This is a big area here. I'm going to run straight through there and then down there and break them off, making sure I'm nice and consistent all the way around there. I'm starting to get maybe a little bit more dense than I did over on that side, so I will bear that in mind. I will, you know, come down here and let that be, and then maybe create another one here and then another one off of it, but maybe not so much in the gap, or maybe I just run a tiny bit on that line and then not really join it, you know, leave it a little bit sort of more scarce. And then I'll, in the next gap, you know, create an extra tail off. So always trying to make sure we're being nice and consistent all the way around. So here I'm going to join those two together. I've got a big area here, so I am going to get very big with these ones and break them out. And you can grab a yellow that maybe just doesn't quite make it down to the purple area. You know, it does die out, just naturally just dies out towards the bottom. Like so. Awesome. Let's carry on all the way around. That's cool. Maybe we grab a little straggler there. Maybe go ahead and just introduce this one here and let that veer off over to the right, and maybe it breaks off again. This gap's looking a little bit too big, so I'm going to introduce a couple in here. Just a couple of thin ones. Lovely stuff, lovely stuff. Let's keep this going. We're very nearly there, actually, taking a look at that. Oh, we are. We're right there. Let that run down into the blue spot over there, into here. I'm gonna let that one run over here, down into there, another one into this gap. Apologies if I'm repeating myself a little bit too much, but obviously that is the part of the design at this stage. Anyway, we are very much repeating ourselves all the way around, trying to create lots of randomness and squiggles and breakouts in the color, little areas that die out, and we've gone all the way around and created this beautiful looking space. Let's go to our colors and grab that purpley tone. It's the fourth color on that top row. And again, you're going to make your way on that outer edge and try to, run some of the purple into some of the blues. So have some fun now again, just letting them run outwards towards the end, and they can fork off as well. They can break out and break into 2s and 3s. So we're trying to take some of those blues now and bring them closer to the edge of the design and break them out, create little curves and squiggles and all sorts. So I kind of apologize for some of the repetition, but it's just the way it is, isn't it? That's just this particular design. I'm sure you're happy with your result though. If you're at this stage of the design, I'm sure you're happy with how much beauty and sort of detail we've got in here. You can see there in that gap there, I just introduced an extra line because there wasn't anything really to build off of. And you can make some of these purple ones really bright, run over the top of them a few times if you wish. Let some of them fade out as they make their way towards the edge. Lovely, and it just creates that excellent little bit of transition between all of the colors. Run the yellows into the blues and then let them just fade out into the purples. They look great. Little curves, little twists. I'm just looking for some of those blue lines that I can then build on top of. And again, follow the guide to an extent. We've got a line there that separates it where it just runs under what would essentially be an eyelid. We're not going to introduce one, but that's essentially what that is. So don't go too crazy towards the edges. Down here, I don't really need to do quite a lot, to be honest with you. I've got very little amount of space in there to be working in. So I'm just going to continue to take a look at what I can do. And I want them all to naturally run a little bit lighter in terms of pressure and just fade out as they get towards that edge. So at this point, I don't really have to do very much at all. You can let your lines overlap each other as well. That is perfectly acceptable. If anything, it will look great because it will just nicely dense out the space a little bit more. Breaking them out, they can break out in 3s, they can break out in like a 1 or a 2, up to you. So I recommend probably up to around about sort of 2 to 3 per line will look okay. If you do any more than like 4, I would imagine it's going to get a little bit too dense. And also you want to have those ones that just lightly just fade away, blend away. And this is looking fantastic. Very cool. Very up my street. I love this type of stuff. Again, I'm just looking at my guide now. I can see this line running across the top. I'm just going to leave that be a little bit. I'm not going to press too firm as it runs up towards those edges. And then as we get over here, you can see I'm kind of just not rushing through it. I don't want to rush it, but there's not a lot of space there, so I can't really do too much. And when we zoom out with this beautiful, beautiful looking eye, with all this great detail in there. So now we've done those beautiful streaky lines, let's go ahead and make this look a bit more like an eye. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer above all of our layers, so just underneath our guide as well. We're going to go to our colors and we'll grab this middle color here in the first column. We're going to go to our brush library and we're going to grab calligraphy and the monoline brush. It doesn't matter what your brush size is, all you need to do is draw a circle in the middle of your screen. Put your finger on the screen to make sure it's a nice perfect circle, and you want your circle to go not to the edges of your canvas, you want to still see a perfect circle, but as long as it just covers the edges of your eye, just a little bit like so for a moment. Grab your cursor and just position it in the center of your canvas. So you get the orange lines there, and to get that, just go to snapping and you'll see the vertical orange line and the horizontal, which lets you know you're in the center of your canvas. If we tap on our cursor, we drag our color into that space. If we go to the layer, swipe it to the left and duplicate it, we're going to use the top one as a cookie cutter for the one underneath. So we'll tap on the top one and we will invert it to the opposite, which is a slightly brown color. We're going to grab our cursor and using uniform, we're going to scale this down in size and we're going to position it in the center here. Now, we want to have quite a bit of chunk to the outside edge. So something around about there should be okay. I'm going to be on the more cautious side of adding more than I need potentially. So now we're going to go ahead and tap on the circle here, the dark one, tap on it and use the option of select. Now make sure color fill is grayed out and is turned off. If we then go to the layer of the sort of blue, whitey blue color here, tap on it and use the option of clear, you'll have cut the hole out at the middle and you can delete the layer above the dark hole in the center. You'll end up with something like this. So we're going to grab our cursor, using the uniform option, we're going to scale this down in size and we're going to cover over the center of our eye and we're going to use this as a light source. So we want to get close to those top edges and the bottom edge a little bit. And this is kind of the roundness of the eye. So I'm going to just position mine a little bit like so. We can move it later on anyway and tap on our cursor when we're done. We're then going to go ahead and cut some areas out. So we're going to go to our eraser, tap on the eraser and make sure we're using the monoline brush under calligraphy. The size doesn't really matter too much. And we're going to pop our pen in the center, draw a line out, and we're going to cut a chunk out down here. So we're going to leave this area down here. So I'm going to draw out from that point and draw out to say here. Maybe even draw out to like here as well and leave like a gap in the lighting. So keep these two here. We're then going to add a big light at the top. So we're going to, in the middle, draw outwards to like here. Draw outwards again to around about here. And then we're going to erase this and this. So we can go to our selection tool. We can use the freehand option. We can draw around. So we're going to draw in these gaps. We're then going to draw through this gap, go around and draw through that gap and then tap on our dots. So we've selected these two areas here, meaning we can go up to our layer and we can tap on it and use the option of clear and it will have cut those areas out. Now at the top here, we're going to rotate our canvas upside down a little bit for a moment. We're going to go ahead and grab our eraser and we're going to switch it to the option of inking and the studio pen. And we're going to create some eyelashes. So the ones at the front, this is the front of the eye, they're going to run a little bit sort of straight onward. So my brush size is set to about 15%. You want your weight to be a little bit heavier on the outside. And then as you make your way outwards, we're going to just create more and more lashes and they can be varying sizes and weights to one another. But you want to start off with the weight at the bottom and let that just run outwards towards the edge. A little something like this. And then as they kind of get towards the middle here, we're going to go ahead and just roll those eyelashes over towards the left-hand side. Now they don't have to be super perfect. It's fine, we've got a couple more effects, but I reckon less is more at this stage. And if we rotate our canvas, that's all I'm going to roll with at this particular point. I'm going to change my eraser. I'm going to switch it to airbrushing and the soft brush. Brush size around about sort of 12%. I'm going to fade out this bottom edge. I'm going to go almost horizontally. So I'm going to get rid of these two corners here. I'm going to go almost horizontally, left to right, and fade that out. And then I'm also going to go ahead and fade out the top edge as well. Just get rid of a little bit of this as well. And then at the bottom here, I'm going to go ahead and just run my brush through here, get rid of a good chunk of it. Just erase there, and maybe a little bit at the back edge as well. And then blend off the edges. So just blend out the edges a tiny bit. You can leave a little bit of a harsher line to it if you like it, that's fine. I'm just going to kind of blend that into that little sort of sharper area. That looks pretty cool. And we're going to change the blend mode. We're going to go ahead and go to the layer. We're going to tap on the blend mode and we're going to change it. We're going to change it to the option of hard light. That will let through a little bit more of the colors of our actual design. But your galaxy now should have this like nice little reflection on the top. And I'm going to get rid of these corners a bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and just blend them out a tiny bit more and really run my pen through those corners. I want just the top edge to have that little bit of lighting to it. And I'm going to blend out that top a tiny bit as well. So it's there, but it's not super crispy. And you can continue to refine them if you want, just to your preference. My preference is that this one down here has a nice sharp line to it, but I like that little bit of glow. And that's totally optional. You don't have to do this. You can turn it on and off. It's totally up to you. I'm going to blend out the edges a tiny bit more as well. So we've got that top edge. Now if we actually go ahead and go to our layers and we turn off our guide just to make sure we're happy with the look. At this stage, you're done, but you can change as much as you wish. And I'm going to make one change. I'm going to go down to where we've got our 2 star layers, the layer that actually sits above it, this one here. I'm going to go ahead and continue on that layer. So we've got the background wash, we've got the 2 star layers, and then I've got this layer here with some extra color on. On this layer, I'm going to go to my colors and I'm going to grab the reddy tone at the top of the second column. And our brush wants to be set back to the option of luminance and the nebula brush. And probably with about 4% brush size, I'm going to allow this now just to get in here and change up some of the color. I want that red tone. I want a little bit more warm tones in here. So you can see if I press a little bit with a little bit of extra color, I'm going to end up dashing in these really cosmic kind of looking red tones. And I think they look great. I think they help the yellow just break up a little bit. So I'm just kind of making my way around this edge, just dashing in and just creating little sort of buffs of yellow, and you can let them sorry, red should I say, and you can let them sort of trickle outwards. That's fine. Occasionally they may just look a little bit yellow, but on the odd point they may also add in that little bit of red, and I think that looks great. I can reduce my brush size down to something like 2% and really get in there and add like a particular area of red. You know, I can create like little swells and curls of red, and you don't want to overdo it, but just a little extra color in there I just think looks great. It just breaks up those yellow tones a bit more. And if I go ahead and I zoom in for YouTube and we go ahead and we go full screen with 4, we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed this nebula iris design. As always, please be sure to share your designs with me over on Instagram. I can't wait to see your finished creations. And if you didn't already know, I post weekly tutorials here on my YouTube channel, so make sure to hit the subscribe button. But if you want even more tutorials from me, I post 3 more every single month over on my Patreon. You can get access to a catalogue of over 70 tutorials, have your name featured in videos, sneak peeks, early access, and much, much more. So come and hang out with me over on Patreon and you can support the channel. And just like I said in the video, if you like this particular design, you'll probably like this one on the screen now. So have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.